Hey, welcome to the New England Endurance Podcast, where we celebrate the vibrant endurance community of New England. I'm your host, Art Trapotsis, along with my colleague, Eric Schenker. Hey, Eric.
Hey, Art. Good to see you again.
Nice to see you as well. This podcast is sponsored by The Everyday Athlete, a book about balancing work, family, and fitness, Lark Fine Foods, some tasty cookies, and Kinetic. So, Eric, as we reflect back on our 25 episodes, because this is number 26, there's one glaring omission to our body of work. Do you know what that is?
I think I know. I think I do know. I do believe the podcast is called the New England Endurance Podcast, correct, Art?
Yes,
I just
it
want
is.
to confirm that we have the name correct. And we've had guests from every single New England state, even Connecticut. Okay, we're counting Connecticut as a New England state officially, except for one. And I would say it's better late than never. It's a great way to kick off 25 plus podcasts. And today we are very pleased to interview a very special guest, somebody I've known for many, many years from the great giant state of Rhode Island. So Susan Rancourt, co-founder and chief running officer of Rhode Races and Events. Get it? Rhode, RHODE Races and Events. Susan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you guys very much. Us Rhode Islanders have a bit of a small complex, so we appreciate you recognizing us.
We're starting awesome. Episode 26, big with Rhode Island. So
yes.
Good to have you on.
Welcome,
good to have
Susan.
you on the podcast. Yeah.
It's great to meet you. So Susan's organization, they put on some of the most popular events, like half marathons and marathons in New England, like the Providence and Newport, Narragansett, Jamestown. We're going to get into all these. Eric's going to kick it off with a little bit about Susan.
So let me tell you about Susan, okay? So she's originally from the greatest state in the country and clearly the dominant state of New England, which is New Hampshire, like the two handsome gentlemen with faces for radio that host this podcast. She moved to Rhode Island after college and fell in love with the ocean state. She was a runner in high school and in college and started a career in corporate America. When her husband was diagnosed with cancer, she knew she needed to do something less materialistic with her life and provide more flexibility for her family. So she started working as the national sales manager for Fuel Belt. And that's, Susan, where you and I met. Gosh, I won't say how many years ago that was. But then she moved over to the Endurance Events Productions. She and her partner Zyons started Rhode Races in 2015. And now they host some of those iconic events that Art mentioned before every year, as well as 15 to 20 other events, which is kind of a mind-boggling number of events. So I want to really get into all of that.
Wow. Shall we call Susan the queen of Rhode Island running?
I think she's the crown. We're putting the crown on her head right now.
I know a lot of runners in Rhode Island, not all of them, but small state, so a lot. So there's a lot more people more deserving of that crown. So I'm more like a lady in waiting, I think.
Fair enough. So let's hear a little bit about your journey and your company. We're coming up on 10 years for Rhode Races and Events. You know, what inspired you to create this organization and sort of how has your vision evolved over the years?
Yeah, that's a really good question. My major at URI was textile marketing. And that was, I spent the first 15 years of my career kind of in that realm. But I joke that I always learned more outside the classroom than I did inside the classroom because I was on the track and field team for 2 years. And then like you guys, I actually joined the crew team for 2 years after that.
Nice. So, yeah. What did you row? Were you starboard or port?
I was a port sweep. They actually created a bucket at 6 and 7, so I could be the starboard stroke. Sorry, the starboard stroke.
Excellent. Love a starboard stroke.
Yeah. And I just got back into it in Barrington, which is a town here in Rhode Island, just this past fall, and I missed it so much.
Let me see your calluses.
They're all more. We've been off the water now for about a month, but yeah. But yeah, so when my husband got sick and my kids were small and I really wanted to do something that was more meaningful, and I've been runner, since for many years, and just coincidentally, I was starting to do more triathlons, more long distance events, and at the time, Fuel Belt was the leader of the hydration pack, and I had read a letter about VNU in a magazine, and I honestly don't remember what the magazine was at the time. And so I wrote Fuel Belt, and I was just like, I love your product. I'd be interested. And come to find out, at the time, Fuel Belt was a mile down the street from me in Warren. And Warren is the smallest town in the smallest county in the smallest state. So it was just a crazy coincidence.
Wow.
And, I spent 3 years working there. And then that's where I really got to see the other side of it, because we did so many, like as a national sales manager, we did so many events. And so that's how I ended up working really first for the Providence race. And then, at the time, the person we were working for wasn't the best businessman. So we ended up going out on our own and starting our own company just about 9 years ago, November of 2015. So very strong, a very good partnership.
Congratulations. So what's the overall vision of the company and sort of its mission?
We like to think as we're treating our runners as guests in our home. So my business partner is not a runner, but she comes from a catering background, and she's like a professional at operations and logistics, but she loves to have people, she loves to host events. So she's really like that person that she puts the tablecloths on the athlete food, and she has nice buckets for like your bagels. Like, she does it really well. Where I am the runner, and I've been to many events, so I'm more like, all right, how is this going to flow? And where's the, what's the runner experience like? And how do you be like, I get it. Like when I go to a run club and I see all these people that are training for our full and our half marathons, I know what it means to take that time away from your family in the cold and the dark. And that weighs on me so much that I want to give them that type of event that is deserving of their time, because, we get it. I get what it means to train for an endurance event like this.
That's fantastic. Cool.
That's great perspective. And I love that catering. That makes I think that's going to resonate with a lot of folks, like that, catering is all about the experience, right? It's all about how you deliver that. And so much of events, certainly for people that have done a lot of events, the bar continues to be raised, right, on what that event experience is going to be like. So let's talk about the events, right? So Art had mentioned these are full and half marathons. There's Providence, Newport, Narragansett, Jamestown. Like, that's amazing number of marathons, right?
There's 3 marathons in there. So Newport, Narragansett, and Providence are the 3 marathons.
Okay, Newport, Narragansett, Providence are the 3 marathons. Talk to us a little bit about the portfolio then, Susan, if you could, sort of like, what are the big iconic events? What are some of the lesser known events? Can you just take us through the road races and events?
Sure. So Providence had been the biggest event for many, many years. We always liken it as the little sister to the Boston Marathon, because we're, 2 weeks following Boston. And when Boston, when there was the Boston bombing, we were the first event back in New England. And that was a very, very scary time. We invited a lot of the runners who weren't able to finish in April that day into our race on May. And the tears were just amazing. But so that traditionally was a big event. If you know anything about Rhode Island, you know that right now we have a huge issue with the bridge that goes in and out of Providence, which essentially cuts all of East Bay, which is where I live, off from the city because it's shut down. It's shut down. So that has been a huge impact on our ability to get the Providence race done. So we've had to completely change that. So Newport, in the meantime, has kind of grown in the absence of Providence really being able to be the size that it was. So Newport is we capped it at 4,200 people this year. It's going to be a lot bigger. But it's crazy is that, if you know anything about road racing, traditionally your 20-year-old is about 20% of your demographic. Mm-hmm. In Newport, it was 54% of the field was under 30 years old, which is just crazy.
Why is that, Susan? I think that's super interesting. Is it just that that's a cool, hot spot for the younger generation? Like, what do you think the draw was there?
I do think so, because it's, Newport's very Instagram worthy. The whole course is out on Ocean Drive. It's down Bellevue, and they get so many pictures of them, like, tweeting about their food afterwards and all the places they went. But for a race director, what was super difficult for us is that with a 20-year-old, they're bringing their mom and dad, they're bringing their boyfriend, their all their friends came to cheer them on, which, as you guys probably know, when I go run a marathon at 40 years old, my husband's not coming.
Nope.
Nobody else is coming to stand outside in the cold. So for us, logistically, it was a huge challenge because we don't know how many spectators are coming. We can't plan for them. Like when they're standing on the dunes down in Newport, which is a huge no-no, they're not listening to us because there's no way for us to kind of say, oh, you're going to be disqualified. So the spectator management this year is a huge issue for us, which is it's just we don't know how to account for that. So that's a new trend. And what we're seeing, and you may have heard this, is that half marathon is like the quarter life crisis. So there's so many like 20-year-olds that are now doing half a full marathon.
Okay, interesting. Not the midlife crisis, the quarter life crisis.
Quarter life crisis, yeah. So
The
that's a big
half marathon. Okay, I like that. I like
that too.
So we talked about those kind of big events. Are there any, let's say, smaller, lesser known events that people should really know about, though, that you guys put on?
Yeah. So I say my favorite is we do a wine run. And so it's we do one in Westport, Massachusetts, and the other one's in Sakonnet Vineyards. And the Sakonnet Vineyards is the oldest winery in Rhode Island. So 3 miles through the vines with food and music and stuff like that. But my favorite event is the Hangover Classic that we do New Year's Day. And that race is just shy of 40 years old. We took that over from, it was my son's cross-country coach who had done it, who wanted to retire. And I used to do it every year. Because they had the coolest trophies. It was like a beer can with a little runner on the top. I always wanted to win that trophy.
That's on New Year's Day?
Yeah, it's just and it's 5 miles, old school. You line up on the road. There's no water stop. There's no medal. We time it, obviously, but it's, and it's through Colt State Park in Bristol, which is just an absolutely, absolutely beautiful, like coastal route that we do. So that's my favorite way to start the new year.
So speaking of Bristol, I looked at something on your website. You have these, I think there are 5 races: Newport, Providence, Bristol, Jamestown, Narragansett. They're part of this thing called the Rhode Race Series.
Yes, yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? Like, are there age categories? Like, when are these events occur throughout the year? And what do you get for doing all of them?
Sure. So we call it the Rhode Island Running Tour because those are really the 5 most iconic towns that are in Rhode Island. Westerly is probably the only one in Rhode Island that we don't really include, but as far as coastal communities, so they're all like beautiful coastal races. If you do it, you get a discount on the race bundle. You get, I don't have it right now, but Ashworth is our medals provider. Ashworth does the Boston Marathon, all the Timmerman, dating myself, all the Ironman medals. They're in North Attleboro, so they're a good New England company as well. They create this amazing medal for us, and all the races kind of interlock into the series medal. You get a jacket, you get a hat, and you get age group awards. So yeah,
What's the distance for each event? Are they all like half marathons?
It's a half marathon.
They're all halves. Wow. How many months do I have to finish this? Like, does it occur over the length of the year?
It is a calendar year. So the first one obviously starts in April with Newport. Then we go Providence, Bristol, Jamestown, and we finish in Narragansett. So we call Newport and Narragansett our sister races because they're on either side of the bay, and they have the same full half and 5K.
I mean, how many folks do the full series? Just curious.
175 is generally the average.
All right. That's fair number.
Yeah, that's great. And I think what I'm sort of taking away from the first part of our discussion, and I certainly expect people that are listening to this to know, certainly if they're from New England, that Rhode Island probably has some of the most beautiful coastline in New England, right? I think you could, places like a Newport and what have you. Do you guys focus on that? Is making sure that that folks are coming to a road race, that the scenery is part of the experience?
Oh, for sure. Yes. Yeah. And that's kind of our whole thing, is that we say we have iconic races because they're in authentic Rhode Island locations. But yeah, that's kind of our vibe. Our whole thing is anchors on everything. Yeah, kind of what we're known for.
I certainly like that. I've done a couple pretty boring races, and I can actually see now, if I'm thinking about, when does that Newport marathon happen? Like, what time of year is that?
So that is the Saturday before Boston, April 19th this year, because we feel like everybody in New England wants to be a runner that weekend. So,
that's true.
Yeah.
That's very, yeah. No, I'm just thinking it must be absolutely beautiful if you get a nice spring day, but weather can probably be pretty nasty down there with all that coastline as well.
Yes, we've had good days and we've had bad days. So yeah, I've had a few days where I love my job, and a few days I do not love it.
So I have kind of an ignorant question to you two runners. Is every marathon considered a Boston qualifier?
If you want to attract runners, you do, but in order to be a Boston qualifier, you need to have a USATF certified measured course.
Okay, and are any of your events Boston qualifiers?
All three of our marathons are Boston qualifiers.
All right. Okay. There.
How are they? How are they? Are they known as fast races, Susan, or are they pretty tough races?
So Providence used to be, we've had to change that course so many times in Providence because of all the construction that's happening. Providence is a great city. It's called the creative capital. It's probably got a lot more history. We call it like the mini Boston because it is really, really of a cool city. But so much construction has caused us to change that course so many times. So recently it's become a little more hilly. This new course that we've created is a lot flatter. So we're pretty excited to enroll that this May. So it will, like at one point, I think we had 18% of our field was a Boston qualifying field. But again, brand new course this year. So we'll have to wait and see.
Well, it's
Nice.
good that it's getting a little easier because the times are getting harder. So
Yes, yeah.
that's a good time to put out a flat, faster marathon in this region, at least for people to try to go out and get their BQ.
Right, yeah. Yeah,
Awesome.
Newport is pretty flat, but it's so beautiful that you don't even like it's enough of a rolling course that it keeps it interesting. Like nobody wants a pancake flat course. But there are some good climbs out on the second half of the Newport race, which is really where people tend to, start crying and lose their
Well, actually, so speaking of crying, do you have sort of a favorite memory from some of the races you put on over the years? Something you can share with our audience that captures the spirit of your events?
Oh gosh, yeah. So my job generally is on course. And part of my job is if people are behind the cutoff, I have to start talking to them about, what that means.
What is the cutoff?
So for our races, it's 6 hours, but we actually offer an early start option of 7 hours if anybody does need it.
That's cool.
Yeah. But again, most of our races are in very touristy communities. So they are a very strict cutoff, particularly in Newport. It just starts to get dangerous out there because the cars are just busy. So I actually wrote this blog one time, the lessons I've learned from the back of the pack, because I get to hear these absolutely amazing stories of why people are doing these races. Whether it was a weight loss journey or they survived cancer or like their husband told them that they were absolutely worthless and they would never amount to anything. And so it's never like fun to tell someone that they're behind the cutoff. And we work with them quite a bit. I've never pulled anybody off the course that didn't want to be pulled off the course, whether they were hurt or knew they couldn't make it. But yeah, the stories from the people at the back of the pack are absolutely inspiring. So they do help get me out the door every single day.
That's cool.
That's great. I think we've heard some other, I think it was 603 Endurance talked. There was almost a similar story
Yeah,
I
that's
remember
right.
him talking about, which was people that were close to that cutoff. And it's just funny that you said that, Susan, because it's just jarring my memory now that I think that was also the same shared experience of helping people that were in that back of the pack, that cutoff, getting close to that cutoff time and trying to motivate them and get them across the finish line. So I'm sure that can be really inspiring. Are there other ways, like outside of the events themselves, that Road Races and Events is engaging with the local communities and other kind of impact? You have affiliations with certain run clubs or other events or charities, things like that.
Oh, for sure. So I actually coach high school cross country as well, the girls team. So we do like a lot of volunteer work through them. But our mission has really been about fostering running and youth running. So one of the things that we do in the winter, starting, generally around February, we start promoting it in January, something called the Final Mile, which, I'm not going to say this was an original idea because it definitely was not. But it's to work with youth running groups and have them run 25 miles between like February and March. Ideally, they're running 3 miles a week. They have a coach. They can do it at their own time and their own pace. And we create like a chart for them and we give them stickers so they can track all their miles. And then we invite them for free to come to our Newport race and do their final mile on the beach at Easton's Beach. And they finish under the arch, with our marathoners, and they get a medal. And it's really just a way to keep youth active and outside running, ideally through the winter months. And really just kind of give them a love of the sport and give them this incredible experience, at the end of their 25 miles of a marathon is it's fun, the music and the sound and the whole thing. And then they get a medal, and hopefully it kind of ignites that spark for them to want to keep running. So that's our final
Absolutely.
mile program.
That is awesome. What age group are the kids that would do that?
So ideally, they're probably under 12 because, in my mind, once you're 12, you should be able to run a 5K. But this is really for the very beginning runner, just to get them to complete. And I don't care if they run the full mile or not, but it's a mile on the beach. So they're going out Easton's, out one end. And I will say this year we had a challenge because the high tide kind of thwarted us. So we had to shorten the mile up because we ran out of beach space because of high tide. First year that's happened.
This sounds something for you, for the middle-aged cyclist too. You need to run 25 miles this winter, and then you can go do the last mile during one of Susan's events and get a medal. It will not be a BQ, Art. I'm sorry, it will not.
Hey, listen, I've been running about 3.5 miles a week, so
solid.
I'm starting to build up a little bit.
Solid.
That's all you need.
Okay, so what are some of the biggest challenges you've faced as an organization, running endurance events? And how have you overcome them? Because it's a challenge to run these events, I'm sure.
And I'm sure it's not news, but councils, city councils, councilmen, council people who think that we make all this money off road races, and obviously we don't. Anybody who's a race director does not you don't see race directors making six figures. We just don't make that kind of money. Yeah, but they look at events and they see all these people and they think, oh, you're making tons of money, and we, obviously we do not. So they're always and the impact on the residents, we get it. We tie up roads, we create traffic. And the voters, they reach out to the council people, and then that's kind of where the friction point is. So we work really hard to create courses that are less impactful for residents. Be aware, like our Bristol race, we started 6:30 in the morning just because we're trying to get everybody off the roads before Bristol really starts to be awake and get moving. But our whole livelihood oftentimes lies in the hands of 5 people on a city council.
Wow. So you got to be nice.
So are you guys officially lobbyists then? And you try to put your own people on the city council or something like that? Make sure you got some runners on that city council?
I wish I knew that many people, but I don't. But we do follow the races pretty closely. I mean, we out of 39 cities and towns of Rhode Island, I think we figured out we have had a race in 25 of them. So, we're pretty versed in the police, who the police chiefs are. And, it just, we do follow the race.
Do you guys just run your own events, or would you help somebody organize an event?
So out of our 18 events that we did this year, 7 of them were our own. The others were for our local nonprofits.
Okay.
Girls on the Run is a big,
Yep.
one of our big ones. We do Gatsby Days, which is, for those of you outside of Rhode Island, was really the spark of the revolution. It wasn't that tea party. It was the burning of the Gatsby. But yes, it's we do a lot of nonprofit events.
So what makes road races and events sort of stand out from other event groups?
We would like to think it's the operations end of it. We spend hours and everyone's like, well, what are you doing during the winter when you don't have races? We look at every different aspect of what could possibly happen because we throw a lot of balls in the air. We hope they all come down like in an orchestra. That never happens. For example, this year in Newport, we had a water main break on our course. We discovered it the morning we were setting up, which luckily we didn't have to change our marathon course, which then would make it not a Boston qualifier, which would have been a whole other thing. But it rerouted our shuttles 20 minutes each way, which a lot of our participants didn't know this happened. And we got bad reviews because of the wait that they then had to incur waiting for shuttles because of the rerouting. So these are things that you just don't plan for.
That's tough. Yeah, I know it. Yeah, I think, every good company deals with adversity and tries to make up for it maybe in the future with their customers, if you had a bad year. I did some quick, checks on your races, and there were so many awesome reviews and the scenery, and it's well run, and you guys have a great organization there.
Thank you very much.
So cool.
Susan, are there some cool things that you guys are doing that are unique to you, or are there some cool trends? Again, you can't invent everything, but I think I was reading that you have a race app that has audio cues for some of the races. What is that?
So I find particularly for running a full and a half marathon, even though some of the races are bigger races and you're surrounded by, lots of people, Like when I used to travel all the time, I used to love to hear about the history that was surrounding me when I was running. And so what I've done is, if they use this Race Joy app, I've created, as they run past certain places on our courses, like little tidbits of information about what they're seeing when they run past it, just so they get a little bit of history. Like when we go past Hammersmith, which is, Jackie Onassis' childhood home, I kind of point out, oh, look over your right shoulder, that's Hammersmith, that's where JFK and Jackie Onassis spent, some time, things like that.
That's
Wow.
cool.
So that's obviously tied to some form of GPS or cellular tower location-based app, huh? Wow.
Yeah, so Race Joy uses GPS. And so when they hit certain part, and it does other things, it's a really cool app, but I have layered in some audio cues so you can hear it while you run past.
Can you layer in like, hey, there's a big ass hill coming up, you better pace yourself?
Well, one of the things I did actually in Newport was we called it the Strava Mile. Like the Strava Mile, I think everybody knows about it. So I did do a Strava segment on mile 24 to 25 because that's that hill that I was saying when people start crying. So now I make it like a little challenge, like who's going to get the laurel crown for Strava by running up this mile the fastest.
A woman after my own heart right here.
That's how you motivate Art. Now you're tugging on his heartstrings. Just call it a segment and he's all over.
Yeah, we'll see if all that works with Strava's new capabilities and their API issues, but hopefully that still works.
Okay, so for first-time runners, and maybe for first-time runners that are new to some of your events, like which one do you recommend that they start with? And do you have any advice for folks?
Good question. I love our Narragansett event, the one that's in late October. I don't love running in the summer. I hate it so much. I tend to cycle more in the summer. But with the late October event, you could really do a half marathon training in the 8 weeks before the race. And it's an absolutely beautiful race, but it's understated. For me, it's quintessential Rhode Island because you're running you get to see like this Coast Guard cutter and the expansive coastal views, the beautiful Newport Bridge that just is like amazing. I think a mile long of coastline just of the bridge. And then you run around the narrow river, which is where I rode when I was at URI. So there's that part of it. Nice. I just love the Narragansett course so much.
Is there a 5K or 10K distance?
There's a 5K on that one. Yep.
All right. There we go.
And you finish at Narragansett Town Beach, which is Narragansett's considered the happiest seaside town in Rhode Island. So it's a great time of year to be there.
Awesome. I think we're getting a geography lesson on Rhode Island like no other, because I don't think anybody else has dropped so much knowledge on their local state that they're organizing in. So any new or exciting events or initiatives on the horizon for road races?
No, I mean, Providence has got a little bit of, we had sold it a few years ago and then that didn't really work out. So we just got it back. This coming 2025 will be the first year that we have it back. So, if anybody wants to Google the history of that race, I think the history of the Providence race matches kind of the history of Providence with the understories of it. So that's really our big focus right now, is to make sure we have a new course and make sure it's a beautiful course and it works for everybody. And we're keeping it very small this year because we've moved mostly to bike paths versus being on the road.
What do you hope for like a participation level for that event?
We're limiting that to 2,500 people this year.
2,500. Okay. Very nice. So, Susan, you grew up in New Hampshire. You probably run all over New England. I'm just curious, are there any hidden gem routes or events that aren't your own that you can recommend for other runners listening to this podcast?
In Rhode Island or anywhere?
Anywhere. It can be Rhode Island. It can be anywhere.
In New England. In New England.
Yeah.
I will say my favorite place to run is the cross-country trails at Gunstock Mountain. So.
Wow. Okay. So up the side of the mountain and like where they do cross-country skiing?
Yes, but I actually did a race at Gunstock where it was the peak to peak where you did a couple of them. But this one is cross-country skiing. So it's more flat than going up the side of the mountain. So if you're looking at Gunstock, the cross-country trails are kind of over to the.
Check that out, Eric.
That sounds really cool. It combines many things that I like: trail running, cross-country skiing, mountains.
Well, and we just learned on the last podcast that at Gunstock, there's a hidden gem biathlon where cross-country ski and then they shoot paintball guns.
Yes. Gunstock does a great job. They have so many fun events. So they do a really good job out there.
I think that we might need somebody from Gunstock on the pod here coming up here.
Is there anything else you'd like to plug to our millions of listeners before we start to wind down the podcast? Anything you'd like anybody to know about with
Yes.
regards to your?
If anybody's never run in Rhode Island, like, don't discount it and think we're just and I had never been to Rhode Island before I went to school here. So I get that people just kind of sidestep it beforehand. But we have, in my mind, the most beautiful places to run here. So in fact, we just came back from Ireland and we were looking at the coast and like, yeah, all right.
I think that's a perfect segue to our final and last burning question for you. Susan, tell us why you agree that New England is the greatest endurance region in the United States, clearly better than Ireland, if not the world. So tell us why you agree.
I think I'm going to repeat a lot of what your other guests have said, but when you run in New England, you have got to have grit and determination, because not only do we have some of the most beautiful places to live and work and run and bike and so many different sports that we can do, but we are going to do it in all weather, no matter what. But, we pride ourselves on being like, oh, it's snowing? That's all right. I'll go run.
Heck yes. That's a great answer, Susan. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast today and sharing your story with us. And we'll be sure to send people to roadraces.com, which is RHODE races.com. You guys run some amazing events. I actually had no idea before this podcast that, all of those iconic marathons and half marathons I heard about were actually run by one organization. So that's really cool that I learned that. And we'll be tagging you on our Instagram page as well, which is at New England Endurance. And it was great to meet you.
Yeah.
Nice.
Susan, great to see you again. And we really appreciate it. And I'll say, until next time, get out there, rain or shine, and explore the beautiful terrain and coastline of New England.
Thank you, guys.